So, Dan, you are one of the founders of Elevate Gym,
Hmm.
a gym which I really love visiting. Really quite interested to run through just a few things that separate good gyms from bad gyms, if there is such a thing.
Hmm.
Kicking off, I'd like to cover off your opinion on why some gyms fail, and not just some, like so many gyms that start up fail.
It's hard, especially because like you as an independent, you're competing with um, the big guns
Mm,
in the game, Ballantyne's, David Lloyd's, Virgin Active, and all these guys. That when you're working with people that have got thousands of people on their books, and they can do it at such a price point where the mass covers the costs and the running. Like you're working against these guys, and it's hard work.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of independents fail, I think, because the business model
Hmm.
and the price point are wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we've got it right. We've transitioned various different times, and we're in a transition point at the minute. But I
Is
think
that staying flexible important, do you think? Is that maybe where some of them um
yes, from an independence perspective, you've got almost like two ways of doing a gym. Really, you've kind of got your open gym where you fill it with machines, and very similar to like a commercial gym. You'll run that kind of point where people come and go as they please. They get on with their stuff in the studios or in the main gym with the weights and all that sort of thing. You may have people in PTs and stuff like that in there as well, doing bits and bobs. But when you kind of then separate yourself to become more of a kind of functional fitness center, CrossFit, and all these sort of things, where it is basically a bare room to a certain degree with a few racks
mhm,
and free weights. This is where it's almost a little bit harder to um, not to get customers, but to make sure you've got enough customers to cover in your books. And if you're trying to do a price point to compete with some of the commercial gyms, it just
yeah,
doesn't work.
got you.
It just doesn't work where, when some of the big commercial gyms you're paying, between, some of the budget gyms, 20 quid a month,
Yeah.
some of the premium ones up to, if it's leisure facilities, 80, 90, £100 a month, where they may have a few thousand people on their books. An independent setting, if you've got only 50 to 100 to maybe 200 people at the very most, those competitive price points that trying to compete with these, it it just doesn't cover the costs.
No. So it is a scale thing that makes those bigger gyms in some ways easier to run.
To us, yeah, definitely, definitely, and a lot of commercial gyms, they do some employed PT opportunities, but particularly normally it's your freelance,
Yeah.
self-employed PT. You pay the gym rent,
Hmm.
and again, from an independence point of view, that almost makes things a little bit easier in the same way where independents can pay you a rent. Their
Yes.
custom's their custom, and revenue is easy to generate, but there's always that conflict of interest. Anybody that come in into the gym is looking after themselves, and they're always trying to not
Right.
to poach clients and stuff like
No.
that. But there's never that kind of looking after each other as a community.
So that's quite interesting. Um, do we think then there's something to be said for the smaller gyms being more about a community and building a culture of people?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I know from ourselves what we've got here at Elevate. The community is one of the pivotal parts of it. Not only of what it is from a social perspective, but also, exercise isn't easy. To do anything growth in any way, shape, or form, whether it's fitness, health, business, or anything, there needs to be some uncomfortability. There needs to be some kind of drive, and to delve into some of these uncomfortable areas, it's always nicer if someone's holding your hand. And it doesn't always necessarily need to be a coach. If it's one of your friend or your partner or someone that's, the person you see once or twice a week in the gym, if they're always there, they're going to be holding your hand and you're going to suffer together.
So that's quite interesting because yes, from my experience, the smaller gyms, the independents, you have far more of that community and accountability just from
Amen.
the people that are around you,
Yeah.
rather than 1,000 people coming in and out on a running machine. You touched on something there about, it's not easy. I think that's a kind of good segue to jump into. From what you see over the last 2 decades, you've done this. What do you think people struggle with most when it comes to committing to a new way of doing things or a new routine? Why are we still 2 decades on having to educate people that they need to exercise a few times a week?
If I knew that, I'd be a rich man. Culture, a lot of around it. We're in a society and in a country where it's a reactionary service from health services and all that sort of thing. Where if someone's ill or they've got problems, the only time normally you'll get treated or triaged or whatever is when it's gone too far.
Okay.
Or it's gone to a point where you've crossed this borderline. Now you're going to get treated for X, Y, and Z. Where I think we need to become more preventative as a kind of general rule set, and that obviously comes down to just health of fitness and exercise and nutrition, which I think because of these kind of ingrained cultures that are in the society, that we all know. If you tell anybody that exercise is good for them, they know. They don't need to be preached at. They know that eating healthy, whole foods, exercise is good for them. Does it make it do it for them? No, of course not. Because it requires change, and it requires uncomfortability, and it requires change of habits.
Yes.
You know,
It's quite telling, really, the number of discussions I have in my field of work where the issue is never the issue. So if somebody has a problem sleeping, or they have a particular ailment, or they're finding it difficult to concentrate, and you go and say, "Are you doing the basics? Are you eating well, sleeping well, exercising well?" 9 times out of 10, 2 of those 3 are missing always. But yet we're still constantly fixated with, I can't even say the quick fix, but the lazy answer.
we live in a culture where the immediacy of gratification is always there.
Yeah.
Where if you want to change any kind of health or fitness related thing, it requires time and effort. If and it's very much in the kind of industry, especially from an independence and a kind of individual PT and coaches, and I'm not kind of degrading any of these guys, but when these people kind of sell these transformation packages and 12-week shred and all that, and isn't that a lot of these people do really well and all absolute well done to you.
Wizard marketeers, I guess.
Yeah, but there's a false side of all this. There may be some change within that 3 months of doing X, Y, and Z. Be a huge amount of calorie deficit, strict on exercise, strict on nutrition to get to X, Y, and Z. But you're not actually learning any life lessons to carry forward. You're not necessarily learning how to eat correctly, to maintain, to kind of build a sustainable lifestyle for not just for you, but your family and everything else.
What I think you're saying is that because we live in an instant gratification society, and we're sold the results, like we're always sold the results, we're not sold the work.
Oh, amen.
So it's a 12-week plan, so you'll look like this. It's a 6-week eating thing, so you'll be ripped. We're not actually selling the importance of the journey to maintain and manifest those habits.
Definitely, and I think that's because of that, people struggle to buy into kind of the journey of health and fitness a little bit more, because it's not just a quick fix. It is a lifelong journey, and there's a lot of people that want to jump into changing their habits, changing their physique and all that sort of thing, and they almost see that some of these 12-week shreds and 12-week plans are the way forward, and they get some results from them, but 99% of these people you'll see yo-yo back to exactly where they've been before. So what changed? ideally one of the things that myself and my business partners and the guys in our team we're all about is, it's about that longevity. There's about the future of ourselves and everybody else around us. I've seen it in my grandparents and how through their, and very much within, a cultural thing. As soon as you retired, you slowed down.
Yeah.
And how I've seen my grandparents wither of the people they were, but exercise wasn't necessarily a or isn't a thing they did. And now I'm talking about my grandparents are in their 90s now.
Do you think retirement was set as a bit of a target and
Oh,
that whole
amen.
mentality?
I'm going to live once I retire, or I'm
Yes.
going to live my best life. I'm going to do whatever once I retire, or I'm going to slow down because work was hard,
Yeah.
and especially back in those days, a lot of it was manual labour and all that sort of thing. It's not like so much now where a lot of people are stuck behind desks and stuff like that. But that was that the culture was once you retired, you slowed down,
Yeah.
and I think that reflected in a poorer life, poorer health span when they're older. And I think this is the kind of things we want to be looking at. Is it's not necessarily about having a long lifespan; it's about having a long health span. And this is kind of what we want to try and promote. As much as I can be, I still want to be slinging it around in my best ability. It won't be how I am now, but my best ability when I'm in my 70s, 80s, and 90s. And there's no reason why I won't do if I keep myself moving.
If you maintain it.
My parents are now in both in their mid 60s, and they're in a great shape for their age. And it took a long time for them, even blooming having me as their son, to keep nagging and nagging and nagging to
Yeah.
eventually get them to realise that it was of benefit to them. Yeah,
The whole concept of health span is a really interesting concept, actually. It's being able to be fully functional for as long as you can. And I wonder whether the types of work a couple of generations ago reflected this whole
yeah,
mindset of aiming towards the end of this so I
yeah,
can
yeah.
sit down and do nothing, and how little we knew how sort of detrimental it was. Something specific I've noticed about Elevate over the years is there isn't an interest in any one thing. So if I've got an ailment or I want to focus on my biceps, not that I need to, of course, anymore, then there is never a right, let's get some dumbbells and do some curls.
Yeah,
It's a what is the end goal? What are we trying to accomplish here?
yeah.
And how does that work with you as a whole? Maybe you could speak a little bit about, how is that the approach? Like if I've got a problem with my elbow, surely we just work on the elbow.
If you've got an injury around something like that, it's not always the site of the pain that may be the issue.
Oh, really?
So I think that's kind of one of the things we're really lucky at. We're having some really good coaches to actually to understand some of that, and for us all to have our specialisms in all these different areas, but we can help each other, and especially within a kind of an independent gym, you've got that, you know, you don't, you're quite fearful indirectly for asking help or advice because you might lose them as a client.
Yes.
And at the same time, we live in a world where, there is so much information on the internet and access to for various different reasons, and there's so much crap
Yeah.
information out there. So a lot of people can be quite misguided by some of that information and actually
Okay.
treat people incorrectly.
Yes. So if focusing on it not being the site of the pain, which is an interesting way to state it, are you saying if someone's got a hip problem, it might not be the hip? They might not need to put a wedge in their shoe.
No,
Does
not that.
how does that flow work? Like where would you be looking?
Well, fundamentally, you want to be looking at their kind of their movement patterns,
Okay.
looking at what's moving, what's not moving, and particularly kind of finding out what's not moving, and then kind of trying to balance things out. We're always There's no such thing as perfect. We're always balancing on that teeter of either side of the kind of the pivot point, and just if you are in one area of your body is not moving correctly, it's going to have a consequence somewhere else.
I can actually speak to that because in my 20s I was told I need a back operation by the time I was 30, and they wanted to fuse a couple of discs together. Now, surgery scares the life out of me, and so I did everything I could to not do that, but it was becoming debilitating. Until I started focusing on everything that, I hate to say it, the chiropractors, the NHS were saying not to focus on. They were just saying, bank on this, you're going to need this surgery. And I have the emails, I have the letters, but I stuck with strengthening and trying to figure out a way around it. And now, 15 years, 2 decades on, I do not suffer at all with my back, which for me is quite scary, really, because if I was put in that position, which I absolutely was, how many other people around the world are thinking that is the only way?
Yeah, and I think some of that also then kind of, we see it quite a lot orientated around some of the pre and postnatal kind of females that come into the gym, predominantly around kind of, oh, you shouldn't do this. I'm now pregnant. I've been told I can't do this by the midwife or the, and it's a lot of kind of the health services orientated around the a bracket of you should, you shouldn't.
Yes.
Could this potentially cause you more harm if done incorrectly? Yes, or maybe you shouldn't do it. And I think that's where it gets a little bit as an industry for PTs and coaches, we lose out quite a lot. Where I think, particularly in this country, we don't have a good link up between health services, physios, osteopaths, PTs, and all that sort of thing. Where in the States, there's a really great network.
That's interesting.
It's starting to become better than in this country.
Right.
But it takes a lot of work.
So recently I was speaking to a surgeon who was telling me that in the 80s and 90s, when people had knee problems, there was a big, exciting push to cut out as much meniscus as they could. And now, 30 years on, they're looking back going, oh, maybe that wasn't quite the right idea. Now, for me, I find that a little bit worrying, but equally, it's like any other industry. It evolves, right?
Same as research.
Right.
What we know now, what we knew then, in a decade, 2 decades, 100 years' time, we're probably thinking, what on earth were we doing?
Yes. But don't we hold these medical kind of practices and institutions in such high regard and think it is perfect and they have got the right answer? Do we think they've got the answers too much?
Definitely, and I think that some of those, especially from a nutritional standpoint, it's mental. They're still holding on to some of the research by Ansel Keys back in the 60s.
Wow.
Of saturated fats are bad, and they're still holding on to it. But that's been the nutritional guidance from the NHS, from the FDA for so long. The FDA is getting better. It's started to change a little bit, but it's been there for so long. But how many people have been impacted by these guidelines? And I can't see them changing too quickly because there'll be lawsuits all over the place.
Yes. Well, and it's ingrained. It's ingrained in the culture, in the training. I mean, to reverse all of that is a catastrophic amount of work. So I know a really big subject we talk about is motivation. When I text you in the morning and I can't be asked to come in, it doesn't happen quite as often now. We had a guest on a few weeks ago, and he talked a lot about what needs to happen to make motivation happen. And he was very much of the opinion that motivation does not come without action. I'd love to know your take on it, sort of focused around training and what your general feeling is around people that just can't make the changes in their life to get committed to exercise.
Personally, from my point of view, I see exercise and good healthy food choices shouldn't be a motivation. It should be a unquestionable.
Wow. Okay.
It's
So like brushing your teeth.
Yeah,
It's just what happens.
It's just what happens. If you have motivation is a choice. I have the motivation or I haven't.
Yes.
I get up in the morning. I'm motivated to do X.
Or I make myself motivated. Whatever
or
that
I
means.
do something to make myself motivated. Sometimes that could be, a routine you get into before you do X. put on some good music, whatever that is, but there's something that happens pre to being like, right, I'm motivated to do boom. Where if that doesn't happen, I can't be out today. I'm not motivated. I'm not going to do it. In and around that, if you've got an injury or illness or something, in yourself if it's I am not well enough to do something, or if me being a lazy ass,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to do it. Where I think, in my viewpoint, motivation shouldn't come into it. It shouldn't be a choice. You do it, full stop.
Now that's fascinating, actually. Looking at the motivation comes from motive, right?
Yeah.
A motive is a reason. So what it sounds like you're saying is we've kind of misusing the word motivation as a reason to do something, where really you shouldn't need a motive. It's either what you're doing. You actually need a reason. You need a reason for what you're doing.
Why should you be motivated to make yourself better?
Yeah,
But both
the fundamental one.
from a health span, it's such a you eat better, you exercise, your sleep improves, your cognition improves, your energy improves. The consequences of doing the simple things, and it's not about going down to the gym and spending 90 minutes on the treadmill. Or, you don't have to do huge amounts.
No.
And that's one of the things that I suppose we're elevate. The more experience you have as a coach, and keep it simple, work on the foundations, push yourself out your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Work on your strength, work on your fitness in various different ways. Happy days. And I think that's what it should be. A kind of motivation. Yeah, it's a little bit loosey goosey for me at the minute.
That is a really different perspective. It is overused. As you've been explaining, I've been going through thinking, no, it's nonsense. It actually should be, what's the consequence of not doing this? What's the consequence of
Yeah.
not exercising? Well, if you're at home, if you're comfortable with the consequence that later on you're going to have a harder time, you might be ill more, you like all of the things we know that happen. If you're happy with the consequences, yeah, motivation shouldn't come into it.
Schwarzenegger was on a podcast. He spoke about in the first 2 hours of his day he didn't think, and
Wow.
it was he referenced it being that in that 2 hours he sorted out his nutrition for the day, he exercised, he set his business plan, or what he did, all these various different jobs in which he didn't think. Obviously he had to think, but it was about, they were the unquestionables, the unnegotiables. These things happened, and then he got on with his day.
Wow, I love that. That is so true. What are those immovable things?
Yeah, the non-negotiables. And I do not like running. I'm going to chuck my trainers on. I'm going to go for a run. Hated most of it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a choice. It was going to happen.
Yes.
And that is orientated around my current goals, training regime, and all that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily about everybody needs to go for a run, but
No.
it's about that you need to do something that's going to make you better.
What would you say elevates North Star is and was, and has it changed?
Life as a coach is hard work. The shift patterns of mornings, evenings, sometimes 12, 15-hour days. You've got to love what you're doing, but being in a being in a place where we can provide a better work-life balance for our coaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've always personally thought it, but I've heard lots of different prominent coaches reference it. 20 to 30 hours of actual coaching a week is like the upper limit
That
of
is a
any
lot.
and
If you think
some
every single one of those hours is a meeting, like how many people have 30
yeah,
meetings a
exactly.
day,
Some people,
a week?
especially from an outsider's point of view, you may look, oh, you've only got 20 hours of work this week, or
Yeah.
25, or it's not that it's just that 25 hours. So like you say, it's that 25, 30 hours of actual personable meetings with people,
Interactions, yeah.
and it's draining. And I think kind of to offer and be able to facilitate the better work-life balance, because we've all, you know I'm coming into my 40s. We've got a young family and all that sort of thing. You know, I don't spend every night at home. You know, I get home to put my boy to bed one night a week. So to have those opportunities to kind of offer a better work-life balance would be, for a staffing point of view, would definitely be
So
kind of
it's as much a gym about the staff, like your
amen.
North Star's about looking after your staff as much
Definitely
as clients.
providing a culture and an opportunity for people to kind of express and do what they love.
What is your client looking for? So when I met you, it was about strength specifically. I wanted to improve what I could lift. Has everybody just got their own little thing, or is there some specific special niche that you think Elevate really kills it here?
I think predominantly, again, 80-90% of people, when you ask them, I want to get fitter, I want to get stronger, I want to lose weight. It kind of really doesn't change in and around that. But, you know, as at Elevate, we do have some real good specialisms where people do come in with disabilities, amputees, you know, various different problems. We get referrals from physios, from the NHS, from
Okay.
PCH, and so we've created that kind of link up with these people and these communities to kind of reaffirm our expertise.
And it seems to be all about community. It seems to be about attention to the individual and helping them along on their own journey. And that does seem to be the resounding sentiment, that an independent gym is there for the needs of the individual. Yes, there's a little bit of cookie cutter going on, but ultimately it's about helping each person reach their own goal with a supportive environment and people that are accountable around them. Not just more teachers, quote unquote, but actually people who are doing it. And you don't get that in the same way in a big gym.
When you do go into a commercial gym, you know, and you see other people working out, and yes, I'm obviously coming from a coach's perspective, but 90% of people really don't know what they're doing.
No,
Really don't know
other
what
than
they're doing.
me.
And it's one of those ones where, you know, if you're spending X amount of time in the gym, how much better could you use your time productively if you're using someone else?
Yes.
And how many times are those people saying, I haven't got the time to do something X, Y, and Z? You know, time is finite. You know, use your time productively and then kind of get on with
Yes.
whatever else you've got to get on with.
And that accountability to have somebody there, in my opinion, is worth every penny.
The accountability is like, yeah, if you've made a booking, you're not only letting yourself down, but you're letting someone else down.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and you're gonna be charged for it as well. So it's one of those ones.
Triple
Yeah,
loss.
amen. So you need that. You need that accountability that it's going to force you to do something.
Yes.
And I think that accountability within a community, within that space of independent, is kind of it's absolutely like it's priceless. You know, whether you're just turning up to a class, you know, you may just be doing that. You maybe not be assigned up to a coach, but you know your mate's going to be there.
Yeah.
You know that the community is going to be there because you don't want to be that one that if you didn't turn up, like, oh, where were you last week?
Yes. It's a good place to end, I think. Dan, thank you very much. It was really enjoyable. Learned a lot.
Yeah, good matches.